They call it freedom. That feeling when you start the engine, the hum of control under your hands, the illusion that you can go anywhere, anytime. For most people, that sound is the soundtrack of success, the proof that you've made it. But what if that hum is not the sound of freedom, but of financial decay? Because sitting right there, in your driveway, might be the most efficient wealth destruction machine ever invented. The silent wealth killer in your driveway. We don't notice it because it looks normal. Everyone around us does the same thing. We buy the car, we upgrade it every few years, we celebrate the comfort, the brand, the status. And yet, quietly, the real cost of car ownership compounds behind the scenes. A financial pattern so embedded in middle-class behavior that it disguises itself as necessity. This isn't about guilt, it's about psychology, about understanding why something that feels essential can quietly shape the destiny of your financial life. In the language of behavioral finance, cars trigger one of the strongest biases in the modern market: the illusion of utility. You convince yourself you're buying convenience, when in reality, you're re-entering one of the most predictable traps in financial psychology: recurring depreciation disguised as lifestyle progress. Every month, thousands of professionals work overtime to afford vehicles that lose value while they sleep. They believe they're moving forward, but financially, they're accelerating in reverse. It's not just a car, it's a subscription to slow wealth erosion. Think about it. Housing, food, taxes, these are the obvious costs. But transportation, that's the invisible drain. The quiet variable that doesn't just consume cash, but locks you into a behavioral cycle of upgrades, insurance, fuel, maintenance, and social comparison. If we charted this pattern over time, the psychology of ownership versus the trajectory of net worth, the correlation would shock most people. It's not just economics, it's identity economics. We buy status because we fear standing still. We equate motion with meaning. But the system profits from that instinct every single day. Here's the part most people miss. The true cost of car ownership isn't the price on the sticker. It is the compounded opportunity cost. The money you could have invested, the time you could have bought back, the optionality you unknowingly traded for convenience. And that S why the car becomes a symbol, a mirror reflecting our collective misunderstanding of wealth. In the psychology of markets, what you drive often says less about where you're going and more about what's quietly driving you. So before we go further, take a moment to visualize that vehicle sitting outside your home. Imagine every cost, visible and invisible, orbiting around it like satellites: insurance, fuel, depreciation, financing, registration, repairs, emotional attachment. Each one a gravitational pull on your financial trajectory. This isn't about selling the car, it's about seeing it differently. Because once you understand how the system turns necessity into status, and status into financial drain, you begin to recognize a repeating pattern, not just in your own life, but across the global economy. And that pattern, as history will show us, has appeared before. It's not new, it's just hidden in plain sight. Welcome to the psychology of financial behavior, where freedom and debt often wear the same color. History has a strange way of whispering warnings, softly, patiently, until we choose to listen. Every economic era has its symbol of progress. For ancient empires, it was land and gold. For the Industrial Revolution, it was factories and steam. In the 20th century, it became the automobile, the machine that turned mobility into identity and debt into an acceptable form of aspiration. When Henry Ford introduced the Model T in 1908, he didn't just create a product. He reprogrammed an entire society's definition of freedom. Suddenly, personal transportation was no longer a luxury. It was a necessity. Ownership became the metric of success. The financial psychology of the modern middle class was born. You are what you drive. By the 1920s, that belief collided with another phenomenon: easy credit. Banks realized that people weren't just buying cars, they were buying feelings. The illusion of status was now available on installment. And when the 1929 crash arrived, it wasn't just the stock market that collapsed. It was a mindset. The same patterns of overextension, optimism, and denial that fueled the market cycles of the Roaring '20s still echo through our global economy today. Fast forward to 2008. Different era, same rhythm. The housing bubble burst, but the mechanism was familiar. Leverage built on social proof, consumption justified by comfort, and an entire system rewarding appearance over substance. Behavioral finance scholars often call this the wealth transfer moment. When optimism at the top becomes opportunity for those quietly watching from below. And in between those collapses, 1929 and 2008, millions of individuals experienced their own private recessions, not on Wall Street, but in their garages and driveways. Because the same money patterns that governed empires and corporations also govern households. When people confuse consumption with progress, the result is always the same: the illusion of prosperity followed by the erosion of security. It's not that people are irrational, it's that they're predictably human. Financial history repeats not because we forget facts, but because we forget feelings. The excitement of a new car, the validation of belonging, the dopamine rush of perceived advancement, these are timeless forces. Whether in the Roman Republic, 18th century London, or modern-day Los Angeles, the pattern remains. We borrow tomorrow's freedom to buy today's comfort. In every collapse, there's a transfer, not just of money, but of mindset. The wealthy think in systems, the middle class in payments, and over centuries, that psychological gap becomes an economic chasm. Look at post-war America. The automobile industry became the beating heart of economic optimism. Suburbs expanded, highways stretched across the horizon, and for the first time, a car wasn't just transportation. It was identity infrastructure. By 1960, more households owned vehicles than held investment accounts. That ratio still defines modern consumer psychology. Each generation believed they were different, smarter, safer, more informed, and yet the wealth patterns remained. Debt disguised as mobility, ownership mistaken for progress. The vehicle that once symbolized freedom slowly became a cage: financial, behavioral, emotional. And here's the quiet irony. Even as society evolved from horses to engines, from cash to credit, from markets to algorithms, the underlying pattern never changed. Every great economic cycle, from empires to modern economies, includes the same ingredients: optimism, leverage, denial, collapse, reset. If you overlay those cycles with the rise of consumer transportation, a stunning parallel emerges. As wealth concentrates and confidence peaks, ownership explodes. As cycles reverse, people suddenly see the cost of the comfort they once celebrated. That is the rhythm of financial history. And the car, your car, is its smallest, most relatable example. Because when you strip away the chrome and the brand, the vehicle becomes what it always was: a mirror of human behavior, a reflection of our collective psychology about value, freedom, and belonging. So before we analyze how this pattern functions inside today's economy, we have to understand one thing. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it rhymes, down to the very engine that hums in your driveway. Why does it happen? Why do intelligent, educated people, professionals who understand math, risk, and budgets, still fall into the same financial behavior loop? Because the system isn't built around logic. It's built around emotion, repetition, and design. At the surface, owning a car looks rational: mobility, safety, independence. But beneath that narrative lies a powerful architecture of incentives that operates like an invisible behavioral engine, one that extracts wealth not through force, but through psychology. Let's break it down. Step 1. manufactured necessity. The modern economy functions by converting human desires into recurring expenses. Transportation could have remained a service, but corporations realized that ownership produces deeper attachment and predictable cash flow. The market cycle depends on constant churn, so manufacturers and financiers engineered the product to decay faster than the debt used to buy it. Planned obsolescence became policy, not accident. Step 2. Emotional financing. Behavioral finance research shows that people don't make large purchases through numbers. They do it through stories. Dealerships, advertisements, even interest rates are designed to engage the investor mindset in emotional form. You're not just buying a car, you're buying identity continuity, a sense that your external life matches your internal narrative. The same mental process that drives investors to chase bull markets drives consumers to upgrade their vehicles during economic highs. Step 3. Systemic reinforcement. Governments subsidize transportation infrastructure because it fuels GDP. Banks profit from auto loans. Insurance companies profit from ownership. Energy companies profit from movement. Every layer of the global economy depends on the assumption that you will keep driving, literally and financially. It's not conspiracy, it's structure, a behavioral loop disguised as choice. Step 4. The comfort trap. Over time, the recurring payments fade into the background. They become normal. You don't think about the monthly car note. It's automatic. That's where the trap deepens. Because automatic spending bypasses conscious awareness, the system uses inertia as leverage. The same inertia that keeps your portfolio untouched during a bear market keeps your driveway full during a personal recession. In behavioral finance, this is called anchoring to comfort. Once your mind links a symbol, a car, a home, a brand, to safety, any attempt to downsize feels like loss. And humans are loss-averse. That aversion fuels what economists call lifestyle inflation, a gradual increase in spending that mirrors perceived progress but undermines actual stability. Step 5. Identity debt. When your self-image becomes tied to what you own, you begin defending the system that exploits you. People who would question every tax dollar rarely question their car payment. Why? Because it's not just a purchase. It's part of who they are. That's the hidden cost of ownership. Not just financial depreciation, but psychological dependence. If you zoom out, this mechanism resembles the market cycles that shape nations. Optimism rises, spending accelerates, leverage builds, decline begins, reset occurs. Whether it's a housing bubble or a driveway full of financed cars, the mechanism is identical. It's a microeconomic echo of a global behavioral pattern. This is why the phrase "the system" isn't abstract. It's tangible, embedded in daily choices, disguised as convenience. Every purchase reinforces the architecture that extracts wealth from motion. The more we move, the more it gains. The less we pause, the less we see. And yet, there's a paradox here. The car, which symbolizes personal control, is actually a form of dependency. It anchors you to fuel prices, to credit cycles, to insurance fluctuations, to infrastructure designed for debt sustainability. You believe you control the wheel, but economically the system is driving you. Consider how this scales. Multiply one person's payments by millions, then multiply that by years. The result is a silent river of cash flow, flowing not toward freedom, but toward corporate and institutional balance sheets. A wealth transfer masked as mobility. That's the systemic mechanism. It's not malicious, it's efficient. It doesn't need to convince you. It only needs you to keep doing what everyone else does. And that's why understanding this loop matters. Because once you see the system, you can step outside it. You can start noticing the triggers that keep your behavior predictable. The ads showing freedom, the financing plans disguised as 0%, the constant pressure to upgrade rather than sustain. We often talk about the market crash 2026, the debt crisis, or the coming economic reset. But those are just macro reflections of the same mechanism at the micro level. The collapse always begins at home. In the end, the system doesn't collapse because of numbers. It collapses because psychology reaches its limits, because people start waking up to the cost of the comfort they were sold. And that realization, quiet, gradual, uncomfortable, is where true financial awareness begins. We like to believe we've evolved, that technology and access to information have made us immune to old mistakes. But the deeper truth is this: digital tools may have changed the surface of the economy, yet the psychology behind it hasn't shifted at all. Today, the same system that once used chrome and horsepower now uses pixels and algorithms. It sells you convenience through apps, status through screens, and progress through monthly subscriptions. The pattern of consumption is identical, only faster, quieter, and far more personalized. The silent wealth killer in your driveway has simply migrated to the cloud. Let's look at the numbers. The average new vehicle in the United States now costs over $48,000, financed at interest rates not seen in decades. Insurance premiums are at record highs. Used car values have fallen sharply, erasing billions in paper equity. Meanwhile, public transportation funding stagnates, locking individuals into private debt cycles disguised as independence. And yet, people still buy, often more than before, because the system has evolved to feed on emotion, not logic. It's not about transportation anymore, it's about self-expression, identity signaling, algorithmic validation. Scroll through social media and you'll see it everywhere. Influencers teaching financial freedom while posing next to vehicles financed on 7-year loans. The illusion persists because it feels good. And feeling good in the short term always outruns rational awareness. In this new landscape, behavioral finance meets artificial intelligence. AI analyzes purchasing patterns, predicts upgrade cycles, and even recommends optimal payment plans. The market knows your weakness before you do. Every like, search, and scroll becomes data, fuel for an economic engine that monetizes predictability. That's why experts now warn of the next great correction. Not just a market crash 2026 in the global economy, but a correction of perception. When enough people realize that their sense of progress has been engineered, the illusion starts to fracture. Because what we call a financial collapse isn't always about GDP or interest rates. Sometimes it's about psychology catching up with reality. It has about millions of people simultaneously realizing that convenience has a compounding cost, and that cost has been quietly stacking for years. The debt crisis we fear isn't theoretical, it's behavioral. Every financed car, every upgrade, every deferred expense forms the foundation of a broader economic reset. The modern world doesn't need another Great Depression to collapse. It only needs the moment when confidence runs out. But here's the paradox. This system thrives on subtlety. It doesn't punish recklessness immediately. It rewards it first. You get the car, the likes, the validation. Only later comes the friction, the payments, the repairs, the hidden stress. It's a delayed feedback loop engineered for compliance. And yet, despite the data, the cycle continues. Because humans adapt faster to comfort than to awareness. Most people can handle hardship, but not the idea of losing convenience. So, what does this mean for us today? It means that the wealth transfer of this era won't come from a stock market alone. It will come from behavioral asymmetry. The small percentage of people who see the pattern early, act quietly, and position themselves on the right side of systemic inefficiency. Those who understand that quiet investing doesn't just mean stocks or bonds, it means mental reprogramming. It means choosing optionality over ownership, liquidity over image, awareness over autopilot. Because while everyone else is reacting to the noise, to headlines about inflation, interest rates, and politics, the real change is happening in silence. in the behavioral undercurrents shaping every purchase decision, every brand aspiration, every dopamine-driven scroll. That's how systemic shifts begin, not with explosions, but with quiet awakenings. And if history is any guide, those awakenings always come before the next reset, the moment when societies rediscover what value truly means. We are entering that moment now. The global economy is preparing for another cycle, one defined not just by numbers, but by collective behavior. And if the pattern holds, the next correction won't start on Wall Street. It will start in the driveway. If every market cycle begins in the mind, then the truest form of investing isn't about money at all. It's about behavior. This is where financial psychology meets self-awareness, where wealth is redefined not as possession, but as perception. Because what drives markets, what drives every boom and bust, is human emotion wearing a financial mask. Fear, pride, validation, comparison. These are the invisible currencies behind every economic chart, every debt crisis, every wealth transfer. When people talk about wealth mindset, they often reduce it to motivation or positivity. But in reality, a true wealth mindset is a kind of quiet discipline, the ability to separate value from feeling, to see comfort as a variable, not a goal. That's the difference between quiet investing and emotional spending. Quiet investors don't chase appearances, they chase optionality. They don't measure success by what's visible, but by how much flexibility remains unseen. In behavioral finance, this principle is called delayed gratification bias reversal. It's the psychological turning point where awareness overrides impulse. Once you internalize how systems exploit emotional timing, how every limited offer, every zero down payment, every upgrade event is designed to trigger fear of missing out, you begin to reclaim your autonomy. And that shift doesn't just protect your wallet, it rewires your worldview. Let's be honest, most people don't overspend because they're reckless. They overspend because they're seeking emotional safety in an uncertain world. The car, the home, the brand. These are symbols of control in a chaotic system. But symbols can become prisons. This is where financial psychology becomes survival psychology. Because in a collapsing or volatile economy, resilience isn't about income level. It's about behavioral flexibility. The investor mindset that survives is the one that recognizes patterns early and adjusts quietly. Ask yourself, when the last economic cycle shifted, did you react or observe? Did you feel panic or clarity? That's the invisible divide between the reactive majority and the reflective minority. The truth is, markets change because people don't. The same cognitive biases that shaped the Dutch tulip mania in the 1600s shape digital spending today. The same optimism that fueled the 1920s powers the credit markets of the 2020s. Technology evolves, but the human nervous system remains the same. Wired for short-term comfort, blind to long-term decay. And that's why most financial education fails. Because it teaches information, not introspection. You can memorize interest rates, learn compound growth, follow the smartest investors, and still fall prey to the same emotional loop. Status, purchase, regret, justification, repetition. Breaking that loop requires something deeper, a behavioral reset. Start by reframing what wealth means. Wealth isn't the accumulation of things, it's the elimination of dependency. It's not the number of assets you own, but the number of decisions you can make without fear. This is why quiet investing feels so countercultural. It's invisible, patient, and emotionally neutral. It doesn't seek applause, and it rarely trends online. But over time, it compounds, not just financially, but psychologically. Each conscious decision, to delay a purchase, to question a norm, to observe a pattern, becomes a micro-investment in autonomy. That is the real ROI of awareness. And here's the subtle truth most people never learn. Financial freedom isn't built from income. It's built from clarity. Clarity about your triggers. Clarity about the stories you've been sold. Clarity about the comfort you mistake for progress. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And from that moment on, every financial choice, from your car payment to your career path, becomes a reflection of one question. Am I buying freedom, or am I financing identity? That is the essence of financial psychology, and it's why the real revolution isn't economic, it's internal. So where does this leave us? In a world that rewards movement, noise, and display, how do we choose stillness, clarity, and control? It starts with seeing the system not as an enemy, but as a mirror. The same forces that extract wealth can also teach discipline. The same patterns that trap most people can guide you toward freedom, if you study them instead of repeating them. Because awareness isn't rebellion, it's alignment, the quiet act of stepping out of the loop. Look again at that car in your driveway. It's more than metal and wheels. It's a lesson, a daily reminder of how financial psychology works in real time. Every mile you drive represents not just distance, but choice. Every payment represents a trade between short-term comfort and long-term agency. When you begin to notice those trades, you start living differently. You spend less to prove, more to preserve. You measure success not in horsepower, but in hours of peace. You stop asking, "What can I afford?" and start asking, "What's it costing me in awareness?" And that question, once asked, quietly changes everything. The truth is, the next economic reset won't be televised. It won't arrive as a breaking headline or a stock chart. It will happen silently inside millions of individuals who begin to reprogram their behavior, who realize that wealth isn't earned through louder ambition, but through quieter observation. Because the global economy, for all its complexity, runs on a simple rhythm. Spenders feed the system, observers transcend it. And the moment you switch categories, the moment you stop playing by its emotional timing, you begin to feel what real freedom actually is. You'll still participate in the world. You'll still drive, work, live, but now you'll do it consciously. That's the difference between drifting through a market cycle and directing one. And as these cycles repeat, as optimism peaks, as debt grows, as history rhymes once again, you'll start to see what few people ever notice. The pattern isn't external, it's internal. Markets rise and fall, but behavior endures. And the few who understand that, who master their impulses rather than outsource their awareness, will always be the ones who emerge stronger after every reset. That's the quiet secret of resilience. So next time you hear the familiar hum of your car engine, pause for a second. Listen not to the sound of motion, but to the silence behind it. That silence is your opportunity to observe, to realign, to reclaim your own financial rhythm before the world resets it for you. Because at the end of every economic story, there are only two kinds of characters: those who chase the illusion and those who study it. Both live in the same world, but only one sees the pattern. And that's what this entire journey, from financial history to behavioral awareness, has been leading to. The understanding that wealth is not the result of movement, but of mastery. So keep your awareness quiet, your habits steady, and your perception clean. The system will continue to hum, endlessly, efficiently, but you no longer have to feed it unconsciously. Because now you know, freedom isn't in the driveway. It's in the discipline of mind that sees beyond it. That's why understanding the psychology of collapse isn't fear. It's preparation.